Mykhailo Boychuk is an artist and a creator who is searching for the formula of eternity in his art. Coming up next in the program ProART, Dreamers Who Wanted to Change the World, an exhibition about the creators of monumental paintings of the legendary school of Mykhailo Boychuk, was held at the Mystetskiy Arsenal Museum complex in Kyiv. We will talk about art of the years 1910 to 1930, which was a period of great experimentation. These works were considered a trend. People looked at the frescoes and said, "It is so beautiful, just like in a church." In the 1920s, the Artistic and Ceramic Technical School was situated in a picturesque area on the territory of an old monastery. The graduates of Mykhailo Boychuk's workshop, Oksana Pavlenko, Vasil Sedlar, and Ivan Padolka, managed the process here. Young teachers and students were captured in a photo composition during haymaking on the background of the Mykhailo landscapes. Everyone was inspired and had great hopes. They did not even suspect that the school would be destroyed and its students and teachers would be shot. This is a staged photo, but looking at it, we can learn much about Boychuk's style and about other people and painters. These are the 1920s. This was the peak of their hopes. In this photo, we see happy people despite the everyday hardships they faced. These are the people who realized the importance of what they were doing. They were young and full of energy. Ukrainian art of the 20th century gave grandiose personalities and works of a huge artistic value to the world. The creators of the exhibition, dedicated to the school of Mykhailo Boychuk, had to restore the contours of the unique artistic phenomenon based on its remnants. It's as if we're talking about antiquity or something from the ancient Sumerian times, although thousands of years are between us. And even when Boychuk adherents were politically rehabilitated in the 1950s, officials of culture said that it was not a reason for artistic rehabilitation of the Boychuk style as a formalistic tendency hostile to Soviet power. Indeed, Bolsheviks made great efforts in order that nothing would survive to our time.
Ми починаємо з того, чим був такий бойчукізм. Це напрямок монументального мистецтва.
The exhibition Boychukism is a project of a grand style. Around 300 painting, graphic and mosaic works are displayed here. The halls of Mystetskiy Arsenal are like a peculiar laboratory of a master. Looking at unfinished works, drawings and sketches, exhibition visitors can recreate in their imagination the creative kitchen of the painters. Here you can see pieces of paintings, monumental paintings, book graphics and applied art created by Boychuk's adherents. We gathered almost all the ceramic items made by Boychuk's adherents at this exhibition. It is worth noting that only a few of Boychuk's finished works have survived to the present day. All of them were the first to be destroyed. Besides, contemporaries say the main merit of Boychuk was that he suggested an idea that was developed by his students later. Mykhailo Boychuk became a teacher when he was in Paris. He joined together like-minded persons. Having displayed his works at Salon des Indépendants, he surprised very demanding art aficionados of Paris. It is not by chance that he established such art schools, where artists gather and work together. Firstly, he differed from other artists with his unusual charisma. Secondly, he possessed the charisma of a great man. He was a very strong person, able to persuade other people and infect others with his vision of art. His disciples were very devoted to their work. Being a writer by his nature, Mykhailo Boychuk saw a clearly defined purpose, the reform of Ukrainian art. A new Ukrainian style had to become a national style and enter the everyday life of each Ukrainian. Boychuk had not only his own artistic concept, but he also taught his disciples to make mineral paints and tempera. It was made of yolk. He shared with them his unique technique of fresco making. As Padolka said, this is a way of working with form. It is a principle of form generality, which was the basis of monumentalism. Even if we will look at a small drawing of Boychuk's disciples, it is very easy to imagine how it is embedded in a large fresco or a large-scale painting. The picture can be small in size, but this is a monumental work in its essence, says Ihor, Oksametnly. According to Boychuk, monumentalism is an organization of composition and form. This is a special composition on a flat surface that lacks all the unnecessary things. Elements of monumentalism can also be present in graphic works, for example, in a book plate. This is art which has to be available and understandable for ordinary people, so the works depicted a lot of scenes from village life. As an example, the painting "The Sanatorium in Hodjibey" is considered to be one of the best works of Boychuk's painters in Lutsk military barracks. Not only Boychuk adherents, but also other painters took part in it. Despite difficulties, painters of Boychuk's school dreamed and believed that they could change the world for the best through their artworks. They created monumental art, and it meant for them eternal art. They ambitiously called themselves architects of the universe, who created a national style. Speaking the truth, I think that first of all, they wanted to work. They were really honest. They were the children of their time. They did everything sincerely and created a new art form. The exhibition is developed according to all the laws of drama. The exposition featured the significant things that were the culminating point in the project, the curators explained. Among such works there is the painting "The Couple Under an Apple Tree" by Boychuk. It is a so-called secular icon. The painting by Rakitsky is also wonderful. It was some sort of archetype which was associated with the apple tree. So all the Boychuk adherents, the Ivanovs, Sedlar, Padalka and Rakitsky used this subject in their paintings. And of course, we should not forget about early works by Boychuk, which were painted in the decade of 1910. We can see in them the great impact of French art on his creative work. In a certain period of time, a cohort of Boychuk's painters were very popular and their works had a promising future. According to art experts, it was one of the reasons why neither Boychuk nor his disciples left Ukraine. He had a good chance to develop his creative work in Ukraine in the 1920s. Boychuk School was formed as an integral direction at the Art Academy. There, Boychuk could fulfill his dream to teach talented Ukrainian youth, and the Soviet authorities offered him a chance to implement his ideas by creating monumental items. Their works were considered a trend. His workshop thundered throughout the Soviet Union. The painters went abroad and took part in the Venetian Biennale. Their exhibitions were held in Brussels, Amsterdam and Paris. They knew what trends were popular in the whole world, and they tried to meet the European standards. It was a single space until the Iron Curtain divided the USSR and Europe. Of course, he had an opportunity to migrate and stay in the West in 1926 to 1928, when he went abroad. I think the painters hoped that they would never face such medieval wildness and terror. They were ready to reach a compromise. We see this in their works of the early 1930s. The paintings displayed at the rear of the hall are a compromise variant of Boychuk's painters. This is a so-called approach to social realism. According to art experts, one of the most disputed topics is how to characterize Boychukism. To which trends could this phenomenon be placed? Could we call the trend avant-garde of the 1920s and 1930s?
Avant-garde – это как некая практика формирования нового художественного языка.
Avant-garde is a so-called practice of formation of a new artistic language. Boychuk's pictures were painted in avant-garde style because the works include ancient subject or plot. It is not by chance Boychuk called his first group a school of the revival of Byzantine art. But on the other hand, his creative work was far from Cuba futurism, constructionism and suprematism. It is not so important how we will classify Boychukism. All the same, it will always occupy its own niche in Ukrainian art. It is difficult to present the school of such a master as Mykhailo Boychuk comprehensively, because a lot of his paintings and those of his disciples were destroyed. Nevertheless, the authors of the exhibition tried to gather all the fragments which gave a comprehensive presentation of monumentalism and reflected the essence of that epoch. In the first part of the exhibition, we let our visitors see where this style came from. The second part of the exposition is dedicated to the issue of how it was put into practice. Boychuk's painters approved themselves almost in all art practices: easel painting, graphic art, book graphics, illustrations, scenic painting, ceramics and applied art. The main message of Boychuk and the disciples of his school: not only exhibition visitors have to see monumental art, but also dozens of thousands of average people. Masterpieces of the painters have to adorn the dwelling of the people. So the painters went all out in the development of the Mystetskiy Technical College. They established a regular labor force and started to teach them how to make ceramic compositions. Boychukists tried to create an artistic atmosphere everywhere. They also established a puppet theater at the Technical College. It was a so-called revolution nativity show. Little-known works by Boychuk's painters are also presented at the exhibition. Among them, there are stage decorations and sketches for costumes for theatrical performances at the Young Theater of Reformer Les Kurbas. A lot of graphic prints have survived till our days. A lot of placards were destroyed. Only 3 to 4 placards are displayed at the exhibition. There are many graphic works because Sofia Nalopninska Boychuk lived in Kyiv, where she taught graphics and printing. Sofia Nalopninska Boychuk was the first person who started to implement the principles of Boychuk style in graphic painting. Publication of the Kobzar book with modern illustrations became a significant event. The publication of the book drew a storm of criticism and misunderstanding of Soviet authorities in Kyiv. The creators of the exhibition tried to answer a sophisticated and ambiguous question: why was the creative direction of Boychuk's adherents subjected to repression and physical elimination of the master and many of his disciples? Why did Boychuk become hostile to the authorities? He was hostile because he was at fault for glorifying the lower middle class, it is, the Ukrainian peasantry. Peasants replaced the saints in the works of Boychuk's adherents. The Holy Mother was replaced by a peasant woman with a child. The sacralization of peasant reality was the main grounds for the creativity of Boychuk and its main content. Already from the second half of the 1920s, the authorities started criticizing their creative work. They said, "You depicted only peasants, and where's the leading role of the proletariat in your work?" Boychuk returns sacred art. The source of his art is the art of the church, while the church is alien to the proletariat. When in 1929 Boychuk's painters finished painting frescoes in a sanatorium in the Odessa Oblast, peasants visited the sanatorium, looked at the frescoes and said, "Oh God, it is so beautiful, just like in a church." So after that the authorities started to tighten the screws. He wanted to create a national style. Exactly this national component of his creative work was the main reason why the Soviet authorities rejected these works.
Инкриминировали абсолютно вещи бессмысленные. Он часто ездил за границу. Ну, во-первых, он 10 лет своей жизни провел за границей, пока...
He was incriminated for meaningless things. He traveled abroad very often because he studied there. He lived in Vienna, Italy, Krakow, and Paris. In the 1920s, he visited foreign countries very often. Of course, he had certain apprehensions. We can read about that in his letters to Sofia and her letters to him. She literally wrote, "It seems to me that we will probably be shot." She spoke openly about this. A photo depicting Boychuk has survived since 1930. Looking at it, you can see sadness and fatality in his face. The authors of the exhibition told that immediately after the arrest of the artist, the entire legacy of the Boychukists was subjected to medieval vandalism of the Bolshevik authorities. Monumental works were torn off the walls and painted over. Picturesque paintings were burned, cut and torn to shreds. There is a painting called The Shooting in Mykhailo. This is a famous work by Sedliar. It is a significant picture which was sprayed with acid or another sort of liquid that destroyed about 60% of the space of the picture. There was almost a detective story with the works of Boychuk, which were preserved by Yaroslava Muzika in Lviv. When he was 16, her family and Boychuk lived in the same building. He had a workshop in this house. When he came to Kyiv, she took all of his works and preserved them in her apartment. He asked her about it. And when she was arrested in 1948 in Gruzov, her husband took all these works and hid them inside a wall between their apartment and the apartment of his sister. 78 works by Boychuk have survived to this day. Yaroslava Muzika has preserved 52 of them. Within 20 years, Boychukists created about 20 statuesque ensembles. None of them survived to this day. The images of the paintings have survived in the form of black and white reproductions or individual amateur photos.
Фотографии есть, поэтому отчасти мы их и показываем вот на этой реконструкции.
There are photos, so we show them in this modernization. A group of our colleagues tried to reconstruct them and see how it would look if they were colorized. Contemporaries are changing their point of view regarding those or other phenomena or events. But the truth and the deserved gratitude of descendants will inevitably triumph thanks to these exhibitions.
Если мы ставим перед собой вопрос, а что именно дала...
And if we ask ourselves, what exactly did Ukraine contribute to world culture? I think the answer is the art of the period 1910 to 1930s, the period of great experimentation. This period was glorified with outstanding painters who followed world trends. So the main goal of contemporaries is not only to glean and cherish the legacy of talented people who remained in the history of art under the name of Boychukists, but also use and develop their experience. Postscriptum. Modern painters are engaged in muralism, but a few people know that Ukrainian sculptors of monuments from the Boychuk school pioneered this art form already in 1919. They chronologically surpassed the world-famous masterpieces by Mexican muralist Diego Rivera. So the time has come to gather stones together.